Many years ago, I was a young lawyer at Greenberg-Traurig in Florida, and Gary was and still is a role model and someone that I could come to for advice, and still do, professionally and personally. I'm very grateful for that, Gary, and I continue to seek your counsel and wisdom. But Gary, I also have a complaint. You see, there's always a complaint at the end of a compliment. When I joined GT about 14 years ago, and when I was a young summer associate and a prospective lawyer in the firm, and the firm was in the process of wooing and convincing me to join, among all the other things, you never offered me the cocktail and dinner receptions like the ones the mayor is being received with. But despite that, Gary, it's a pleasure to have you here, and I welcome you to the stage.
Our history goes back way before Greenberg-Traurig. Sammy grew up in my house in Miami Beach, and more about that later. I would customarily object to speaking after dinner for fear that I would lose the entire audience, but I know you're all here to hear Mayor Giuliani. No matter how long I talk, no matter how boring I am, that's why we hired him. Yesterday's Parsha was Parshat Pekudei. Next week's Parsha is Parshat Vayikra. I don't expect to talk about either one of them, but I just wanted you to know that I know that. Potchin b'chvod achsania. I would like to acknowledge the graciousness and friendship of the World Jewish Congress and Sam Grundwerg and Shai Hermesh. As is well known, the World Jewish Congress is the international address of the Jewish people, and it is a great honor for our firm to be associated with an organization of its stature. So thank you to Shai Hermesh and Sam Grundwerg for hosting this lovely event. We are grateful and proud to be part of it, and we have a gift for you. Gifts for you. Shai? It looks much more impressive than it is. Don't open it until later. This is not in my speech, but I just need to share this with you about gifts. I was talking to the mayor, and the mayor is the only person who ever got 95% of the Satmar community's vote and 95% of the Lubavitch community's vote. The only person in Jewish history to unite those two communities. And as he said, it drove Mayor Koch crazy. And one of the reasons that the Lubavitch community loved him so much is that in the aftermath of what can only be described as a pogrom in Crown Heights, when Mayor Dinkins refused to take action, Mayor Giuliani decisively, as is his style, stepped in and insisted that law enforcement come in and take action. And the Lubavitch community was very grateful. And the mayor was invited to an audience with the Rebbe. And the Rebbe, as most of you know, was wont to give dollar bills to all his visitors. And the mayor, who had come from a public corruption unit at the U.S. Attorney's Office, this is true. It would be funny even if it weren't true, but it's true. The Rebbe gave him $1, he looked at it in revulsion, and he gave it back. And his political advisor elbowed him in the side and said, "You just blew the Lubavitch vote." He said, "You have disgraced the Rebbe." And the Rebbe, in his wisdom, put his arm around the mayor, looked into his eyes, and said, I understand that you are a public servant who needs to be above corruption. I see you are an honest man, and I'm giving you another $1. In any event, Sammy was, I'm sorry, Sam. Sorry. I knew him when. Was also kind enough to invite my wife of 45 years, Ahuva. She's the one wearing a dress. And you will be pleased to know that she has just become an Ola Chadasha. And if she was difficult to live with and strong-willed before, now that she's an Israeli, oh my God. It was only fair for Sam. I mean, no other spouses got invited, or spice, no other spouses got invited. But it was only right that Sam invited Ahuva, because he literally grew up in our house in Miami Beach. He went to school with my oldest son, and it's only Mida Keneged Mida. By the way, he also invited my granddaughter, not yet marriageable, who also, thank God, is wearing a dress and is spending a year studying in Israel. And so I am especially grateful to Sam Grundberg for his generosity. I have the good fortune to speak immediately before the guest of honor, my new partner, former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani. But before I do so, if I may be permitted a word about the firm, because after all, they're paying our way here. Greenberg Traurig is a large, successful international law firm. But there are many large, successful international law firms. If you have the time later, I will explain to you why we're different and better, but that's not for now. We have also had an Israel practice for about a dozen or more years, started during the Second Intifada, at a time when the Israel economy was truly hurting, was actually crumbling, and our goal was to help Israeli corporations by introducing them to our client base of 50,000 clients to attract foreign investment, trade, and commerce. But to be candid, there are many firms with Israeli practices, though if you have time later, I will explain to you why ours is better. I just want to stop now, because I really don't want to go too deep into this without mentioning, I've never sat at such a distinguished table, so that's why I've forgotten it, but Mr. and Mrs. Liebler, the mayor Nir Barkat, Gila Gamliel, who left, Ellie Groner, they are here to honor the WJC and its guest of honor, but we are very proud to be associated with them. I'd also like to mention the former presence of Sarah Dahan and Donna Chagall, who work in our office and are off organizing tomorrow's event for the mayor, but I hope someone takes a picture of this and shows it to them, because we're very grateful. And I would like to mention the co-head of our Israel practice, Bob Grossman, and the head of our technology practice, Alan Sutton. We're just very grateful to be here. So we are a large, successful international law firm. We have an Israeli practice, and listen carefully, Greenberg Traurig is the only major international law firm with an office in Tel Aviv, with working lawyers, that took advantage when the Knesset changed the rules to allow foreign law firms to practice in Tel Aviv. We took opportunity. We have outstanding foreign-trained multilingual attorneys registered with the Israel Bar and connecting Israeli companies with our platform in 38 cities. 39? 38. 39. Tel Aviv plus 38 others. And I would like to ask the lawyers of the Tel Aviv office to stand and be recognized. By the way, if you have the time later, I can explain why the other international law firms do not that they're happy to accept Israeli business. They do not open offices in Tel Aviv because they have offices in Riyadh, or they represent the Palestinian Authority, or they are worried about economic the economic, what's it called, nuclear consequences of affiliating with Israel. We are proud to have a Tel Aviv office. We are proud to have Tel Aviv on our website. We are proud to list Tel Aviv on our cards. Like the WJC, we are proud to stand with Israel. So, when I told Cesar Alvarez, who was then head of the firm, he was a Cuban Catholic Zionist of the First Order, and I told him that I wanted to go to Israel and see if we could help during the Second Intifada. Bob Grossman enlisted in the effort, Meital Stavinsky, who some of you know. And I told him, he didn't ask me how much time it would take for my practice. He didn't ask me for a budget. He didn't ask me for a forecast. He said, do it, it's the right thing. And if that doesn't tell you everything, that will tell you why we are the kind of firm that Mayor Giuliani joined. So, that brings me to the great American and citizen of the world, Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, who was an extraordinarily accomplished attorney in private practice, who was a historic U.S. attorney and arguably the greatest mayor in the history of New York City, though LaGuardia has some fans and has the distinction of having a street in Tel Aviv, which Giuliani does not yet have. When he decided that he needed a global platform to support his global cybersecurity practice, there was no shortage of firms eager to welcome him. He is, as you can easily imagine, an extraordinary resource. He's an amazing human being. Spending time with him is just an education. And he chose us. On the day he joined us, among widespread media coverage, he took an interview with an Israeli newspaper. He was asked why he chose Greenberg Traurig, and he said that he was impressed by our global platform and our Tel Aviv office. And when I read that, I smiled. The man, after all, is a politician. So when you're talking to an Israeli newspaper, what are you going to say? And then I saw his interview on Fox News, where he said he joined Greenberg Traurig because of its global platform and its Tel Aviv office. And then I saw the story in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, where he said he joined Greenberg Traurig because of its global platform and its Tel Aviv office. And again, I can't tell you how proud we are to be affiliated with this man. If he didn't love Israel, we would be proud of him anyway because he's extraordinary. But he does love Israel. This is a man who shares our love of Israel and the Jewish people, not just with words, but in his kishkas. And I asked him yesterday whether Italians have kishkas, and he wasn't sure. But if Italian Americans have kishkas, Rudy Giuliani loves Israel in them. When I spent a few hours with him in Miami, this interest was predominant. He wanted to know about our practice, about the inbound deals we do in Israel, about the outbound deals we do for Israeli clients. I must admit that we spent some time discussing the New York Yankees because this man knew Yogi Berra. I mean, that's like sort of like knowing the Vilna Gaon. And can tell you stories. But thank God I was able to tell him about our client base, about the great work that we've been doing, about, I could list the deals, but I think that would be really taking advantage of your desire to hear Mayor Giuliani, so I will skip that. But then I invited him to visit Israel, and he accepted in 0.3 seconds. And here he is. As you can imagine, there are tremendous demands on our time. He arrived in Israel 3:30 a.m. after a trip to Poland, the new front line against Russia, who were very eager to speak with him. He is a great American. He is a great legal mind. He was a great U.S. attorney, and he was a great mayor. And I think that his most memorable attribute was that, as we all know, he is probably the only man in the world who could have done the job that he did after 9/11, when he calmed the devastated city and country with courage and dignity and honor and grace. We frequently lack the comprehension to understand why things happen as they do. But looking back at 9/11 and recalling the majestic yet human manner in which the mayor handled the situation, it is an appropriate time for us, a week or so before Purim, to remember the words of Megillat Esther. Umi odea im le'et kazot higat lemalchut. Mordechai, I get emotional. Mordechai said to Esther, who knows whether you arrived at a position of leadership in order to be there at this moment when you are needed. And like Queen Esther, Mayor Giuliani stood up. So, I'm not ready. I'm not finished yet. Okay. There is another reason that you should be happy that Sam Grunberg invited my wife, because she is telling me to sit down. Israeli women. In closing, thanks once more to the WJC, and welcome to Mayor Giuliani, and thanks to all of you. We're going to have a great future.
Thank you very, very much, Gary. Before I start, I'm going to tell you the Yogi Berra story. I don't know how many of you are No. Not the one about the guy in the bullpen. Yeah. Yogi Berra was my hero when I was growing up as a little boy because I was a catcher. And I always wanted to meet him. And when you become mayor, as you know, Mayor, you get to meet famous people. So I got to meet Yogi Berra. I made a point to really get to know him. We became good friends. I played a small role in reconciling his relationship with George Steinbrenner, because George Steinbrenner was also a good friend of mine. So I invited Yogi Berra to my wedding, which was done at Gracie Mansion by Mayor Bloomberg. And Yogi and his wife were guests at my wedding, and I had an uncle who unfortunately died about 2 years ago, who was my hero, a Second World War hero, a police hero, who also loved Yogi Berra. And during the wedding, my uncle went up to Yogi Berra and he said to him, Yogi, I don't know if I have you confused with Joe DiMaggio, but didn't you have several brothers that also played baseball? And Yogi Berra said, I had 3 brothers, including me. That's why you have to, I mean, that makes sense, right? Some way or other. I got to know that all those sayings of his were absolutely, authentically Yogi Berra. I am very honored by all the kind words and tremendously nice things Mayor and Mr. Minister and Gary and all of you have said about me. I always say that my achievements really rest on the shoulders of giants. So I got really famous because of September 11. And September 11, man, I didn't do it alone. I had thousands of police officers and firefighters and rescue workers and who were such heroes. I could spend a lifetime telling you the ways in which they risked their lives to save other people, gave up their lives to save other people. And I just sort of got the reflected glory of that. But my relationship with Israel goes back way, way before that. My first visit to Israel was in 1985. I was United States Attorney then for the Southern District of New York. And I came here for 2 purposes. One was with the Jewish Community Relations Council, who took a number of prominent New Yorkers on a tour of Israel, and the other was because I had to spend 2 days to go through some files involving a Nazi war criminal named Karl Linus, who I prosecuted and had him sent back to Lithuania, where he was executed. But I had to get, there were some files that we weren't able to get from Berlin, and I was able to get them here. So I spent, with my wife, 7 or 8 days here. I got to meet a very young minister then, Bibi Netanyahu. We talked a lot about America and New York. He kind of liked Philadelphia better, but I don't know why. But we became lifelong friends. And through the many times that he ran, lost, and won again, I've continued to be his very good friend. There was even a point in time in which we almost went into business together. And but thank God for the Israeli people, he didn't do that. And I also, got to see what this place was all about. That was right at the time of the Ethiopian migration. So they took me to a camp to help integrate people. I've forgotten the name of the camps, but they were camps that would help these Ethiopian Jews who, as far as I can recall, were almost like pre-Mosaic in their practice of Judaism. And they had to be taught about Judaism and what it was. And I saw the wonderful, beautiful, loving way in which the Israeli people absorbed them. It was like unbelievable. It was also rather strange for me to see 400 or 500 African Americans with yarmulkes on and white shawls. That was a little strange. I had never seen that before in America. And I thought, wow, what an accepting country. The country really means what it says. It's the home of the Jewish people if they need a home. And these Ethiopians sure as heck needed a home. They weren't at the beginning an additive to your society, your economy. Maybe some of the people from Russia were. But these were people that you had to spend an awful lot of time, an awful lot of money to train, to educate, to Then when everybody else left, I stayed behind for 2 days and went through the files of what Karl Linus did in his concentration camp, in which he slaughtered 12,000 people, 10,000 Jews and 2,000 Orthodox Christians. You know what his defense at trial was? His defense at trial was not that he had presided over the killings, but that he had exaggerated the number of people that he killed so he could get a promotion within the SS. And my argument was, well, you should kind of be stuck with that, pal. And we won that case. I had the opportunity to send another Nazi war criminal back to Russia, Mayakovsky's. That was very controversial because Pat Buchanan opposed me in the Reagan administration doing this because he was going to be executed in the Soviet Union. And somehow Pat Buchanan thought that although we could have executions in the United States, executions in the Soviet Union were cruel. But we won that argument, and he was sent back. I learned really my love of Israel from that trip, and also from Ronald Reagan, who I work for, who used to say to me over and over again, he said, in life you have very few good friends. You got a lot of friends, but you got very few good friends. And the same thing is true among nations. He said, really, if it comes down to it, we have very few good friends. And I will tell you, he named 3. United Kingdom, Israel, 4, Australia and Canada. He said, those are the ones I can count on. France, Germany, maybe. who knows how the socialist countries up in Sweden and where they're going to go. But those are our friends. So we have to have their back because they have our back. And that's the way American relations with Israel should be based, not on domestic politics. He said, I know that most American Jews vote Democratic, but I support Israel not because I get votes for it. I support Israel because Israel supports the country that I love the most in the world, the United States of America. And that is the basis also of my love of Israel, because you have been such a friend to America and such a beacon of what America stands for in a place where it's really hard to do that. I mean, when you say, Mr. Minister, that you're in a bad neighborhood, I take Bedford-Stuyvesant over this anytime. Man, you are really in a bad neighborhood. I mean, you are surrounded by dictators, murderers, homicidal, pathological killers, people who train their children at 3. When I was in the Prime Minister's office today, he showed me a video of a 4-year-old girl being taught how to stab people. A 4-year-old girl being taught how to stab people in the civilized world. And I don't know, the UN and the administration in Washington can't see the difference between you and your enemies. I can see the difference. I've seen the difference from the very, very beginning. When I was U.S. Attorney, I had the opportunity to investigate Yasser Arafat for the murder of Leon Klinghoffer, and was convinced that if we could do it, and I tried very, very hard. I don't know if you know Abe Sofayer. He was the counsel to George Shultz in the State Department. We tried very hard to see if we could prosecute him for murder, because I was convinced that I could prove that he personally dictated that drowning of Leon Klinghoffer, who was an American citizen, Jewish, in a wheelchair, who was thrown into the Mediterranean. And then this ridiculous opera has been made about it, kind of glorifying the Palestinians for killing a disabled man in a wheelchair. So when I was mayor, when I got a chance to throw Arafat out of the UN 50 celebration, there was a lot behind that. It wasn't just Arafat. It was, I was the U.S. attorney who spent 13 months ready to prove that he killed Leon Klinghoffer and 27 other Americans and untold numbers of Israelis. And I'd be darned if I was going to sit there with this murderer, you know, celebrating the United Nations when I had specifically made it clear that he wasn't invited. And I sat there in the room going out to make my speech at Avery Fisher Hall, and the head of the United Nations protocol, Mrs. Vanden Heuvel, Mr. Vanden Heuvel was a speechwriter for John Kennedy, and she's kind of, I don't know, she's kind of famous, I guess, or she's part of New York society, and she has a French accent, so everybody thinks she's very smart as a result of it. And she said, this would be very, very, if you throw him out, this would be against all UN protocol. And I said, Mrs. Vanden Heuvel, this is not a UN event. This is my event. I raised every single penny for this event. We're going to play Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. And I'm sorry, just excuse it to my being a prosecutor. I do not like sitting at concerts with murderers. She said, you will get in great trouble for this. Once again, I want to make the argument. you cannot do this. You cannot do this. I said, Mrs. Van den Heuvel, I've heard from my chief of staff, I've heard from my deputy mayor, I've heard from you, and I always listen to everybody's argument. We've now listened to all the arguments, then I decide, and we move forward. Right now, you're in my house, so I don't really give a damn what you think. I'm throwing them out. And we threw them out. The next day, the New York Times condemned me, one of 90 times that they did that. Even though they endorsed me for re-election. Can you believe that? The one good editorial they ever wrote about me was endorsing me for re-election. Then they went right back to attacking me again. And I have kept that editorial. You know where it is? It's in my bathroom. I'm so proud of it because I was right about Arafat. The next day, I held a 2-hour press conference in which I lambasted President Clinton for negotiating with him and saying, probably not as bad as Donald Trump, but things like, how stupid is it to give billions of dollars to a crook? Yeah, you got to be a moron to give billions of dollars to a crook. They said, are you suggesting that the President of the United States is a moron? I said, no, you're asking a question. But that was true. We gave billions of dollars to a crook when it would have been clear to any man of common sense, Democrat or Republican, liberal or conservative, that this man had no interest in peace. That his game was like, on a much more major and more consequential scale, the same game as Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton. They need controversy, they need turmoil, they need fighting in order to make their money and do their shakedowns. And we were going nowhere with them, but we continued to do that. When I was mayor, I left New York City very rarely. I left New York City very rarely because some of my predecessors had gotten into a lot of trouble being out of New York when some kind of tragedy took place, or terrible snowfall, or a blackout, or whatever. So not only was I conscious of it, but all my deputy mayors were conscious of it. And I was almost always within 1 hour of getting back, and very rarely changed that, except for 3 times. Once when I came here for the funeral of Prime Minister Rabin, because 10 days before he had invited me to Israel. I think he had invited me to Israel in September. We were both at a dinner at the Intrepid, and I felt so sad that he invited me and he had been assassinated. So I came on a plane and I got back within 28 hours. Second time I came was when you had a bus bombing. Must have been about 96, 97, I don't remember. Ehud Olmert was the mayor. And I called Ehud and I said to him, I'm very sorry about the bombing. I think also was a killing in Tel Aviv around the same time. There were a couple of incidents. And I also called the mayor of Tel Aviv, but I called Ehud first. And I said to him, what can I do to help? I'll send some people, I'll send some police if you want, or medical people. He said, you know what you can do? I said, no, what can I do? I'll do anything you want. He said, you can send you. And I said, what do you mean, send me? He said, why don't you come? And when we put that bus right back in operation, why don't you ride it with me? Why don't you get on that bus and ride it with me? I said, Ehud, I don't know what I'm doing the next 2 days, but I just canceled it. And I came here, we rode the bus together. I came here thinking that I was going to help lift the morale of the people of Israel, because that's why he asked me to come, to help lift morale, to help show that tourism should continue, to show, as you say, Mayor, resiliency. I have to tell you, I came here sad, really sad. And I saw a group of people in Israel that were just going about their lives. Happy people, they all knew me because I was mayor of New York. and I got the largest percentage of the Jewish vote of anyone who ever ran for mayor of New York. This killed Mayor Koch. Drove him crazy. Drove him nuts. And since Mayor Koch used to like to drive me nuts, every time I saw him, I said, Ed, you got 73%, I got 78%. He said, you must have had that poll fixed. I said, I have 4 different polls. You want to go compare them? He said, no, I don't want to. So I came back, I don't know how to describe it, but I came back sort of uplifted. And I'm going to tell you how that helped me on September 11th. I'm going to tell you how you helped me on September 11th. When my city was attacked on September 11th, I always expected terrorist attacks. We had been attacked in 1993 at the World Trade Center, lost a number of lives then. During the time that I was mayor, we stopped 3 attacks that were public. One very famous one where a guy almost blew up a building and the FBI shot him as he was going for a toggle switch. We stopped a bombing of the subways, and we stopped another bombing of a school, and we stopped more than that you don't know about and that I'm not allowed to tell you about. So I was very aware of the fact that we were the target for terrorism. I knew where the cells were. A lot of them were in New Jersey, Union City, where the blind sheikh came from, who was put in jail for 100 years for planning to blow up our bridges and tunnels. They were in Paterson, New Jersey. I took my police officers and sent them over the borders and had them go into those mosques as undercover agents, something the new mayor has. Mayor Bloomberg continued that, by the way. Not only continued it, he increased it. The new mayor has stopped it, a terrible mistake. So I was ready for a terrorist attack, kind of like what you had, you know, shooting 4 or 5 people or 8 people or bombing a restaurant but I wasn't ready for airplanes being used as missiles attacking my city like we were at war. This was Pearl Harbor, except in a civilian city that was not a naval base. And I relied on every instinct I had on emergency training and all the emergencies I had been through, and I had just written a book on leadership. It hadn't been published yet, but I sort of had gone through all the things. It was a good thing I had done it because I had gone through all the things that sort of helped me be effective in leadership roles. But I remember thinking, when I first heard the number of people that died, how am I going to explain this to my people and keep their morale up? And the first thing that came to mind was being in Israel right after that bus bombing, and how the people of Israel just fought right back, came right back, stood up, and how you're going through worse than we're going through. Maybe this is going to happen to us once like this, or now we have the Boston Marathon and San Bernardino, but we don't go through what you have to go through. Nor do we go through what the people of Britain had to go through during the Second World War. 6, 7, 8 months of bombings, and you don't know the next morning, is your child going to be alive or dead? And I thought, if the Israeli people can get through it, if the British people can get through it, we can get through it. And it gave me strength that night. And I said to the people of my city, I want you to emerge stronger from this, because I want it to be an example to the terrorists that we're stronger than they are. They are relying on pathological, horrible principles. We are relying on things that are beautiful. We're not always beautiful, and we're not always right, and we're not always perfect. But the principles on which our two nations are built are perfect. We're not perfect, but the principles are perfect. It's kind of like, you know, God is perfect, but we're not. The principles of our two nations are perfect. Democracies, rule of law, respect for human life, respect for human dignity, respect for women and the equal role of women in society. My goodness, women can't drive in Saudi Arabia, and women get their heads chopped off if they're the victims of a rape in Iran. Come on. This is our future? It cannot be our future. And your resiliency, I think, helped to give me the strength to give my city its resiliency. Now let me take you, 14, now almost 15 years after the attack of September 11. Twice as many people live in Lower Manhattan. The first 3 weeks after the attack, I didn't think I could get a single business back there or a single person to go live back there. The population of Lower Manhattan in that specific area where the bombing took place has doubled. And there isn't a single person who lives there that doesn't know that the new building is a target to these maniacs. They know it. If they don't know it, they're told about it about every fourth or fifth week by the Department of Homeland Security. And basically what they're saying to the terrorist is, excuse me if I say the wrong word, but I will, screw you. The hell with you. We're built on stronger and better principles than you are, and you're not going to stop us. You're not going to stop us. Now, who teaches that lesson better than the Jewish people? My goodness, I mean, there have been a lot of attempts to wipe you out. And they've all failed. And this one is probably the most pathetic of all. And this one's going to fail. And this is exactly the side America should be on. Like 100%, not 90%, not 80%, not on the other side. It should be 100% behind you in what you're doing, because you're fighting our battle for us on the front lines. We're fighting it where we're fighting it, and you're fighting our battle on the front lines against Islamic extremist terrorism that wants to annihilate us and teaches their children to annihilate us. So how you can't, as an American, love the country of Israel is to me, almost unpatriotic. So Gary is absolutely right. I don't think you really understand how big a role the fact that you had an Israeli office played in my joining this law firm. Yes, I wanted an international platform. Yes, I was very impressed by Richard and everything he told me about the firm and the good people that you had. I was extremely impressed by all the former assistant U.S. attorneys and U.S. attorneys that you have, because they're the only people that I can actually talk to. They're the only ones who understand me. But the idea of having an office in Israel, to me, was just wonderful. And to play a small role in hoping that we can develop even closer business, commercial, and social relationships than we already have. Because I know, and I don't want to get political, so I'm going to stop in about 3 minutes. I know the relationships at the highest levels of our government now are strained. But I'm going to tell you something, and this is from someone who has traveled to every state in the United States. And as Bo knows, I travel to probably 20 or 30 per year every year. There's never been a time in the history of my country where your country is better loved in the United States than today. Forget our president. Okay, just put him aside. Forget no, I mean, I never speak ill of the president outside the United States. He's entitled to his opinion. He's entitled to his opinion. I'm going to tell you that it's not the opinion of the American people. The people in Mississippi and Alabama and the people in Georgia, these were places that, gosh, these were Ku Klux Klan places that were afflicted by anti-Semitism 50 years ago and 60 years ago. They love your country almost as much as you do. If I go give a speech in Georgia and where I can't speak ill of the president, and talk about his policies towards Israel, and talk about how we should be on the side of our friends and not giving up to our enemies, I get a standing ovation. When I went and spoke to the Council of Christians and Jews, I don't know how to say this, there was more enthusiastic support from the evangelical Christians than there were from the Jews, because of the split between the liberal and conservative Jews. I mean, you got a lot of fans in the United States. And the Prime Minister showed me a poll today that demonstrates that, but I knew that. So don't be guided by what's coming out of Washington. Be guided by where the American people are. They're on your side, because they know you're on our side, and they know instinctually, because they're good people, like the people of Israel, of common sense. All they want, really, is a peaceful world. All you want is a peaceful Israel. It would be nice if we could get it by just wishing for it. It'd be nice if we could get it by just negotiating for it. But you can't negotiate with maniacs, because they don't want to negotiate. You can't negotiate with an Ayatollah who has blood on his hands. And while he's negotiating with you, is saying that he wants to destroy one of your closest friends, Israel. You can't negotiate with a man who, during the Iraq War, the Quds Force killed hundreds of American soldiers. I know some of the families who were killed by Iranians. You can't negotiate with this man. There's only one thing you can do. You got to fight him. You got to fight for freedom. There may come a day when we fight so effectively for freedom that we no longer have to fight for it any longer. And I actually believe that, because I believe the principles that we stand for are the principles that the world is moving toward. It may take a while, but we're not going back to chopping people's heads off and not allowing women to sit with men at dinners, or killing people without giving them a right to a trial. We're not going back to that. There may be people who are back there, but we, meaning the world, is not going back to that. So we've got to have faith. Yes, we're fighting now, and we're going to have to fight, and we're going to have to be tough as hell, because that's all they understand. The only thing they understand is being tough, fighting back, not backing down. I was so proud of my president. My president was George Bush, who 10 days after September 11 stood before the Congress and said, "We have now changed our policy toward terrorism. We used to be on defense, now we're on offense." And then we went and bombed the heck out of them in Afghanistan and sent them into their caves. And it's really hard to plan attacks on America when you're sitting in a cave and you're being shot at. It's a lot easier to plan an attack on America when you pull out of Iraq and you pull out of Afghanistan and you draw 12 red lines in the sand and you don't do a darn thing about it. It's a lot easier for them to have plenty of time to plan San Bernardino, Boston, Paris, and who knows what's going to be next, until we go back on offense. We should be pushing them back. They should be worrying about surviving, not planning attacks on us. I believe we're going to get back there. I hope we are, possibly in this election, God willing. In any event, I love the World Jewish Congress, because I believe that you represent the Jewish people in a way that explains the history and the dignity and just a wonderful tenacity. And I love my new law firm, and my partners, shareholders in Tel Aviv, they're just terrific people. I hope you give us a chance to do some business for you. That wouldn't be bad either. Because we want to help you. That's very much a part of it. And mostly, God bless our two countries, and we're gonna be friends forever. This is an undying friendship. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Giuliani. I'd like to call on my colleagues, Shai Hermesh, Izzy Liebler, and Dr. Lawrence Weinbaum. Mayor Giuliani, we'd like to present you on behalf of World Jewish Congress and Israel Council on Foreign Relations with a token of our appreciation. If you can go back and show your friends how many admirers you have here in Israel.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful.